MMA king and I came for the crown. All your phonies and clowns need to move around. Cause I'ma put you in the dirt and have you come out looking brown. But it's okay, don't frown, cause I'm always gonna be around. So listen up, I'm only getting started. This is still the first round.
Hello MMA community, YouTubers, and UFC fans who want to make a killing off of UFC 258 Usman vs. Burns on February 13th. We got a very exciting, very action-packed, full of awesome fights coming up ahead of us this weekend. And from a fighting fan's perspective, a bettor's perspective, this is just the dream card. And this card is going to be one of those cards that really separates the boys from the men when it comes to predictions, because the stuff that's going to be the most what you would imagine from the blind eye, somebody who's not a fighter, somebody who's just not very good at being analytic with the style matchups. So if you're just going off of what's on paper, who's got the most knockouts, who's got the most wins, who's the guy coming off of a win as opposed to the guy coming off of a loss, even the odd makers have made some pretty major mistakes on this card. So we're going to start with a couple of these because unfortunately, and I was so tempted, I almost changed the rules and I was going to do this segment as the full card breakdown so I can remind you guys of how you remember, for example, when I started this segment, the first episode or the first account that I posted when I first opened my Twitter account, Fighting Guru. If you look back, the first post I ever made on my Fighting Guru account was my predictions and my picks for the Khabib card. I went 12 out of 12 with 3 underdogs. Tai Tuivasa, Robert Whittaker, and Rachmanov against Charles Cowboy Oliveira, or whatever his name is. Cowboy Oliveira, I bet against him, against the guy who is debuting. So 3 underdogs out of 12 cashed in, and the other 9 cashed in. I had a perfect card, and a couple of other times it happened as well. I wanted to remind you guys of how I have the best predictions in the game by giving you the full card, but my manager and my partner talked me out of it and said that's what your patrons pay for. It wouldn't be fair to them. So we're going back to partial card breakdowns, but I want you guys to rate me and vote me. I'm going to do the timestamps. Look at the timestamps. Every fight that I broke down on today's segment, I guarantee you there's no way I get not more than 1 wrong. I don't even think I'm going to get 1 wrong, but you can say, hey, Guru, you were wrong. You got more than 1 wrong. If I got more than 1 wrong, come back after the fights are over and throw it in my face. All right, we'll start with my underdog of the day. My underdog of the day, actually now I think might be a pick'ems. The line's been moving up and down on this, but I believe, I don't know, I still can't tell if he's a pick'ems or not, or an underdog. He looks pretty similar. It's up and down. Phil Rowe versus Gabe Green. Yeah, he is a slight underdog. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's a slight underdog, but it's real close. But Gabe Green, this is a guy who, although he's coming off of a loss, he's 0-1. He hasn't won any fights in the UFC. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy, because this is why you got to go above and beyond in your research. Even tape studies and statistics sometimes is not good enough. You got to look beyond that. You got to learn the fighters' personalities and what their goals are. You know why I cashed in on a lot of plus 300, plus 200 prop bets? Because I paid attention to what these people were saying. Who's an example? There was a girl fight, a women's MMA fight. She had never got 1 submission on her record. She had like 3 or 4 knockouts, and she had like 6 decisions, no submissions. But in her interview, she kept saying she wanted to submit this girl. She wanted to get her first submission. I went for the submission prop bet, paying plus 675. Cashed in 2nd round. shoot, what's her name, man? She's an older woman. She was fighting a younger woman. I'll think of it. I'll put it in my notes in the comment section. Lauren Murphy. Lauren Murphy was paying plus 675. I'll show you the bet slip. If it's not out, it may be on my Twitter already, actually. But plus 600, we cashed in on her as a submission, her first and only. But in the interviews, she was saying it all day long. Every one of her interviews, I'm going to submit her. I'm going to submit her. I want to get my first submission. Because she was renewing her contract. Same thing with Clay Guida. He was renewing his contract. He just picked up a 4-fight contract. So that's what I told you guys about Matt Schnell having a baby. I told you about Beneil Dariush having a baby. And in his post-fight interview, he said, look, those extra hours I put in the gym is the reason why I was able to keep coming forward in the third round, the second round, after taking some big shots. I would still keep going and going because the extra hours, the dedication, every time I was finished and I didn't think I had anything left in me, thinking about my firstborn baby coming and me being a dad for the first time, kept me staying in the gym longer and working harder. And I told you guys that. Okay, so back on track. We're going to talk about this fight. Gabe Green is a guy who's got wins that are so impressive that even his losses earned him points. His stocks rode up in his losses. This is a guy who's got so much charisma and so much heart. The fighting spirit and the dog inside of him, even when he's losing, is the same one I told you were going to see in Beneil. If he was facing adversity, he was going to meet it head on, face on. Unlike who I told you his opponent was going to, actually my exact words, where he's the opposite, he runs away. You witnessed that with your own eyes. Diego, while even Beneil fell on the ground and tripped, he ran away to reset. Till he found an opportunity to get away from having to close the distance and get punished. He ran away while Beneil was on the floor. And then when he got up, there was a point in the fight where the referee had to tell him, stop. Go ahead and engage. He cut Diego Fear, and I told you guys he's the opposite of Beneil. He doesn't go on head on, and he'll, unlike the other guys who everybody in my comment section was trying to say, oh, he did a good job against the other grapplers, that's because those guys are not pressure good. I told you that guy's great at counter striking, and that's why he was the only fight, and I've only said this maybe 5 times. It was against, I think, with Maverick in her debut fight, that guy for Jalen Bates that we interviewed, Cyril Gain, and like 1 or 2 other times, Kevin Holland, and one other time, I forgot, where I said you guys can go all in. If you take a loan out, you bet $1,000, you bet your college kid tuition savings on it, and you have my blessings. That's the one I told you about, was Beneil Dariush, and he came through for us unanimously. Whoever gave him the split decision was a weird judge. I don't know what fight he was watching, but there was no rounds that Beneil lost. Anyway, and so we'll celebrate about our 10 and 12, 10 right, 2 wrong, and 1 live betting opportunity that cashed in. So it was really better than 10, 12 if you think about the live betting situation. But anyway, we're going to pick, in this case, the slight underdog. He is Gabe Green. Gabe Green has wins over, like, for example, one of his victories is coming up from a guy who was undefeated. Richard Leroy is a guy who holds wins even against the guy who beat Gabe Green. So guys like Jalen Turner or Christian Aguilera, who we've seen is very good. He looked real good against Sean Brady until Sean Brady took him out. And he also held a good account of himself. Aguilera, in his debut fight in the UFC, he actually looked pretty good and impressed me, even in his loss against, who was it? Actually, no, in his first fight he had won. That's what was impressive. He knocked out in less than 1 minute of the first round. Christian Aguilera knocked out Anthony Ivy, and he won. And that same Christian Aguilera had got beaten by TKO in the first round as well by this guy. And another guy like Jalen Turner, who's in the UFC, who's done pretty well for himself. He also got beaten by TKO. Well, this guy was undefeated. 7 wins, all by finish. 2 submissions. And Gabriel Green, took him out in the second round. He's got such good sense of urgency. It came seconds before the round was over, and you can even see it in his most recent fight. Daniel Rodriguez is a guy who's not your normal. This guy has the makings of a future champion. Daniel Rodriguez landed 180 really good strikes. His accuracy, his volume, his heart. You see him even in his fight against Dwight Grant, I think it was, where he almost got finished. He came back and finished him. So he's got heart. He's got the Eddie Bravo submission game. If it goes to the ground, he's pretty good down there as well. 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu specialist. He's just an all-around great fighter. This guy fought him on a training camp that was 3 weeks. In 3 years, because he was coming off injuries, a shoulder, 3 different injuries, had kept him out of the sport for about 2 or 3 years. And in those 2 or 3 years, he had no more than a total combined amount of 3 weeks of training. And it was a short notice fill-in fight that he took over for somebody else. And this guy went full 3 rounds, absorbed 180 significant strikes from a guy who puts people away in the first round typically. Not many people make it out of the first round, even on full training camps. And just the level of opposition and the heart, the volume, the accuracy, and just the total. I've seen, with all due respect, he's not the worst fighter, don't get me wrong, but Phil Rowe, I've seen him against a guy who is pretty much a white belt in MMA. This guy had no more than 8 months of MMA experience. He came from the boxing world, and he had never hardly had any experience in MMA. He was very new, very green. And this is a guy who Rowe has been doing kickboxing or like taekwondo, whatever his style is, since he was 16 years old. He's been practicing martial arts. Against the guy who's only been doing it for months, he put him out in the first round decisively. It was not even a close fight. And that was a guy who's not even close to being UFC caliber. Besides some boxing, and he doesn't have any other skill sets. And if a guy like this, well-rounded, this versed, he can absorb some good punishment and keep coming. He's got the cardio now in a full camp. Oh man, I don't want to even imagine what this guy's capable of. And watching him in interviews, he's content on getting a finish. And this guy's got a pretty impressive, I think he's got a 100% finish rate. Every one of his wins have been by finish. So I do hold him for it. I do give him the benefit of the doubt. Against Phil Rowe, who's been finished especially, I don't think that this will even go to the scorecards, especially being that the 7 out of 7 wins of Phil Rowe's have also been all by finish. So the prop bet for the under rounds is going to be very enticing, since neither of these guys in all of their victories have ever seen the scorecards. So, but just the level of opposition, the value that we're getting him at, and the hunger. Remember, I told you sometimes coming off of a loss is better than when somebody's coming off of wins. This guy, although he hasn't lost since about 2015, the guys he's beat have records like 0 wins and 2 losses, 4 wins and 0 loss, or 0 wins and 4 losses. They have the first 3 fights, his first 3 wins, his first 2 fights he lost. He started as 0-2 himself, no wins, 2 losses. The only way he got a win was because he started fighting against guys who didn't have any wins themselves. So we know his record is pretty padded, and for somebody who's got fights like that to already have 2 losses, it's not a good look, and I can't trust him at this odds, especially having an opponent who I know looks better in the 3rd round than he did in the 1st round, who's got that dog inside of him. I'm going for the dog here. And the reach advantage is a little bit concerning, so I won't go too hard on it, because the size, this guy does have the size and reach advantage. It's pretty drastic, but I don't think it's going to cause much, because the guy is very durable. He doesn't mind taking punches to give punches. He does have very good chin. He does have good movement. He rolls with the punches very well. He does a lot of good movement. He's not very stationary, so he's got a lot of energy. He doesn't stay around in the same spot. So I do like his chances of putting away Phil Rowe, the Fresh Prince. I suggest, like, this is not a good parlay piece, but it's definitely it's worth some good money on a single bet. All right, we'll talk about now the next fight. Julian Marquez versus Maki Pitolo. This is another underdog I'm going to give you guys, okay? Maki Pitolo is a guy who's not been the most successful in the UFC. He's had a lot of bad luck in the UFC, you can call it, because he's just been matched up against a lot of guys who are just worst style nightmare matchups for the type of fighter he is. And you know, like the Darren Stewart fight, was just a big size and strength discrepancy. And Stewart is just a really good fighter. He's underrated, in my opinion. But besides that, it was a mismatch in technique. Pitolo is a guy who's known just mostly for his durability and his high volume. He throws nonstop. He's got great cardio. He's just real high volume, but not the most technical, not the most sound offensively or defensively. So he absorbs a lot of punches, but he can take it. He's a real tough Hawaiian. He's got some power behind his hands. They call him coconut bombs for a reason. But he's never really the type to, you know, if I don't see somebody able to put him away, because Julian Marquez, he's never won a fight by decision, not even once. All of his fights, every time they've ever gone to decision, even against a guy like Alessio Chikiro, he's lost decisions because he doesn't show the best IQ. Like, we all know this. If you did any studying, you know that Alessio is not a guy who's easy to knock out. He's very unpredictable. He doesn't throw combinations more than once, the same combination. He doesn't stay stationary. He's never in the same place twice. So he's hard to time. And the guy kept surprising him, and just because he was so focused on doing what he does in all of his fights, which was looking for the knockout, like how he got Phil Hawes in the Dana White, but before the knockout, Phil Hawes was dominating him. If it had gone to the scorecards, it was not even going to be a close fight. It would have been a unanimous loss. Julian Marquez would have lost his Dana White Contender Series, and we might have never even seen him in the UFC. So he only made it there to the UFC because of that kick. It was a crazy kick, like the same thing Buckley did that got him to win over Impa, who's got to win over Coconut Bombs. But because Impa's the same thing type of a fighter like Maki, but just a more a little bit more higher volume, a little bit more. He's the same version. He's the exact duplicate of. He's just a little bit of a better version of Pitolo. Everything that Pitolo does, he does the same thing, but just a little bit more. So he started to pull away and edge out a decision against him, I believe. So, but this is a different fight. This is a guy who's not good at decisions. And I do know that Coconut Bombs is, besides losing by submission, like, which is how even Darren Stewart, if I'm not mistaken, let me check. Yeah, see, even when he was having success on the feet, he knew that it was going to take him a long time, and he may have never got it. And with judges, the way they could be these days, they don't want to depend on a judge. So he found the first chance he got, he tried to submit him. He did. He used the striking to set up a submission. Although he could have won by just striking the entire time, he was getting the better of the two in the strikes, but he knew that he could do it easier because the guy was not going to go anywhere soon. He wasn't going to get put away anytime soon. So to conserve his energy and just take the path to least resistance, the less harder path, he had to submit him to put him away. And let's see, before that, all of his losses, besides back in since 2017, only in 2007, he has not been knocked out, or besides the Darren Stewart submission, he has not even been submitted since 2017, and Julian Marquez is not a submission guy. So him winning by decision is a pretty good chance. And it's just their volume. The guy, Julian Marquez, doesn't have as high of a volume as him. He doesn't have as much movement. So I do see him getting hit as much, just not hitting out as much. So it should be a decision win by the underdog. And he's a pretty big-sized underdog here. I don't know why he's such a big underdog, but for some reason he is. They've always been real high on Marquez. I don't know what it is about these Dana White guys, or maybe everybody who ever gets a highlight reel knockout somehow becomes a big favorite in all of their fights. I mean, look what happened with, I told you guys, Michel Pereira was the rightful favorite. And even in the third round, when he was winning all the fights, they still had him as an underdog. And live betting would have made a killing if you guys made money on, if you were listening to me that day. I kept telling you that he's winning. And he was still as an underdog during all 3 rounds of his Michel Pereira versus Chaos Williams fight. Even though he beat him in all those rounds, up until the 3rd round, he was still an underdog. It was a plus 140 underdog. And he was winning all the rounds. I don't know what it is about knockout artists. They think that they're always like the Tyson Nam. Everybody was convinced was going to knock out Chanel. I told you guys 99.99%. My exact percentage in words were almost 100% sure that Tyson Nam doesn't have the technique, the fluidity, or the unorthodox style that I told you a guy like Corey Sandhagen, the Sandman, who was going to knock out Cody Sandhagen, was going to, I said in my exact words, you can ask the guy who does the cape. There's a guy who, you can see his description in my comments. He put a link to his video. He's a guy, they call him Rajan or something. I'm sorry if I missed your name. He just became a member of my Patreon. And he joined just because he wanted to ask me how, because everybody else he does a show where he has a bulletin behind him. He writes all the different handicappers picks on the board, and he tells you guys which handicapper, and so you guys can do a consensus of 5 handicappers pick this guy, 1 handicapper only pick this guy. So instead of having to watch 20 different shows to get answers, you watch one show. Well, that's what he does. After watching everybody's and looking at the results, he joined my patrons. He does DFSs, he does Clint's, he does Pub Sports, he does MMA Prediction Guru. Every prediction guy you guys have heard of, eBay Sports, everybody you guys have heard of, he does all of their names on the board. Look at his segment. He talked so highly about me, how I have more right than wrong. He liked my predictions, and he joined for the Sandhagen. I told him inside the distance. I said it could be a late finish. I said I didn't think he was going to finish him so quickly, but I did tell him that it was going to be Frankie Edgar was going to lose by getting a finished. So I was one of the only guys that gave him that, and the one with the most correct out of all of them. So he joined my Patreon. I want to give him a shout out and also plug him on my show. You guys can get his description, his review link on my descriptions and my comments. Thank you for joining us as well. But yeah, that's a good sign, guys. That tells you guys that a guy who follows everybody, and that's his job to record the data. He saw there was a value in my Patreon, so I hope you guys can see the same thing. And you know my record for underdogs. That was one thing he did mention on his show, that I'm very good at picking underdogs. My rate was about 90%, 80 to 90, somewhere between 80 and 90% in underdogs coming through for us. Most people don't get that type of percentage on regular picks. Okay, so we got 2 underdogs, Maki Pitolo already, and Gabriel Green. But if you guys want to put the smart way, this is something I usually do only for the patrons. I'll give you a way where in case he does win inside the distance, we'll put him in a see how I do. I'm going to give you a trick. This is a recipe. So the majority of our bets will be on the underdog because there's good value. So he'll be a part of my single bet best values, right? He'll be somewhere in the middle, maybe top 5. But in some of our parlays, at least 1 or 2, and one of my most safest parlays with like my 3 most confident picks, I'll also put Julian Marquez inside the distance. So in case it does happen, he does do what he does sometimes, how he finishes his opponents, 100% finish rate. We'll make all of our money back and profit. So this is a way to make sure that no matter who wins, we still make profit. It's a beautiful system, guys. When I say bulletproof, that's why it's worth it. There's not going to be one week, if you just follow instructions, there will never be a week where you don't make profits. It's just a matter of how much. So I hope you guys see the value. There's in one event, you'll make more than your entire month's membership. All right, guys. The next fight we're going to talk about, Kelvin Gastelum versus Ian Heinisch. Kelvin Gastelum, this is a guy who I'm very high on. He run into some bad luck in most recent fights, he like Jack Hermanson, who's a very, very high level. He's like one of the best submission specialists of his division. He's a guy who you can't really leave him with his hands available and free on the ground, or you could be in danger. So after knocking him down, I think he knocked him down. So he was having some success, but it turned into a quick, crazy submission. So, I mean, there's no shame in that. Hermanson's a high-level guy. He's a champion in his former division. He's a top 3, top 5. You know, he was about to fight for the belt if it wasn't for the Vittori Italian nightmare, Italian dream. Stopping him, he would have been the next guy up for the belt. So there's no shame in that. But besides those highest level guys, like he even held a very good account of himself. He earned Fight of the Year against Israel Adesanya, who has huge advantages. Because this is a guy who's had a lot of trouble with weight cuts, and Dana had to force him to fight in a weight class that he wasn't comfortable in, but he did find a lot of success. He got some pretty good knockouts against Jake Ellenberger, against a lot of good opponents. This guy's resume is one of the nicest resumes you'll find, man. He's got some, even in his losses, all of his losses were split decision. He did always hold a good account of himself, and they were always against the top of the division. He's never really lost against anybody that wasn't high level, where as opposed to Ian Heinisch is just a guy who, this is the worst style nightmare matchup for him. Ian is a guy who doesn't have enough volume. He doesn't have enough volume, and he's too patient. He knows that because on the lower, what some people do is when they transition from the lower levels, like the LFAs, the Cage Warriors, they don't realize that when you're on UFC's platform, the highest level of competition, that you can't do the same stuff that you are getting away with. You can't make the same mistakes, and you can't have the same tactics as you did in those organizations where you found success. These are a different level of opponents, so it won't work. So the knockouts that he was getting in the Dana White Contender Series show, even, and in the organization before that, those stuff won't happen in UFC. These guys are too seasoned. They're too savvy. They're too experienced and high level to be able to fall for something that simple. You got to have a well-rounded game. That's why when he fought against, let's see, who was it? When Ian fought against a guy like Omari, who's not the highest level, we've seen Chris Weidman dominated him. Derek Brunson, who's also like more so known like a gatekeeper, who's never really done that well. He didn't do well against Izzy as opposed to how well Kelvin Gastelum. So a guy who, like these guys who were just never been high level and top contenders, were beating him pretty badly. And they won by unanimous not split decisions. So he's been losing to lower level competition by a landslide, as opposed to Kelvin Gastelum, who's been winning against higher level, and when he does lose, he loses to only the best. And just for a lot of reasons, the technique, the volume, the well-rounded skill. This is a guy who didn't get into fighting because he went to jail. Ian Heinisch had some trouble. He used to sell drugs, do drugs. Some of the drugs that he did, like ecstasy and those kinds of stuff, they really mess with you. They permanently eliminate brain cells. So a guy will never be the same after a few times of experimenting with these types of drugs. They kind of they'll make you never the same again. So let that be a lesson learned for you guys watching. Just stay away from those type of things. But more importantly, let's get back on track. This is a guy you don't want to trust your money on. He's not very high level. He doesn't have very high volume. He's not good for winning decisions. He's kind of a one-trick pony. He's a knockout or bust. If he doesn't knock somebody out, he's not going to win, most especially at this level. So the guy is durable, and you see how many times did Israel Adesanya knock him down, and everybody thought it was going to be over. He got right back up. So he's got his role model, his biggest hero. If you watch interviews, Kelvin Gastelum's the biggest. He's got a big poster inside of his house in his bedroom of Rocky. Rocky Balboa is a guy he idolizes because he wants to be like him, right? There's no quit in Rocky Balboa, so there's not going to be any quit in Kelvin Gastelum. And that's a guy who's valued pretty good in this card. He should be a bigger favorite. They're not giving him due to recency bias coming off of the losses, and Ian coming off of a first-round knockout against the guy who we just saw get knocked out just as easily by another guy. So a first-round finish against a guy like Gerald Meerschaert isn't something to run home and brag about to mom. So, you know, that stuff holds a lot of water, I guess. What's on paper and the recency bias is the only reason why we have such good odds on Kelvin Gastelum, who's one of my most confident picks. He's a very good parlay piece as well. So we'll find ways to make some real good money off of this fight for sure. All right, I gave you guys already 3 picks with some very good value. Because I'm in a good mood, I'll give you one more pick. All right, and then after that, we're gonna have to move on. All right, this one has a lot of good value. I already gave you the Gilbert versus Usman breakdown. You know, Gilbert's just not gonna be enough. He doesn't have enough size. He doesn't have enough reach to implement the type of game that he usually needs to win fights. This is not a guy who's gonna ball up and get scared. He's too durable, he's too strong, he's too smart. Like, even some people were saying that, oh, if he tries that, holding him against the cage and trying to beat him in a boring way, that it's not going to work, it's going to get him knocked out. No, he's not. You know how smart this guy is? This is a guy who's an NCAA level, collegiate, Olympian level wrestling, grappling, and just so strong, so well-rounded. You'll notice when he's like holding somebody against the cage, just pay attention. These are the small things that most people will not even understand. If you see it, you won't even appreciate it because you don't know what you're looking at. When he's holding somebody against the cage and dominating him and getting shots off, you know the way he positions his head is so important and it's so perfect. Even if you try your best to throw a shot and try to land a shot, you'll be lucky if you just hit it. If you hit him on the back of his head or on the top of his head, which is a place that doesn't hurt him, it won't affect him, and it won't win you points, and the referee wouldn't even probably let you keep going. But that's your best shot. He puts himself in positions where he doesn't be able to take any punishment while he's giving you. He's just got such good well-rounded skills. Everywhere it goes, he's gonna be fine. He can stuff the takedowns. He's so much more stronger and powerful, and his cardio is so outrageously good. I just don't see the path. The volume, the accuracy. His accuracy is so perfect, man. He throws at such high volume, but then to land at the same place over and over and over. He didn't break this guy's jaw by one punch. This was an accumulation of punches until it finally couldn't take it anymore. So the longer in a 5-round fight especially, who the heck is going to beat this guy in a 5-round fight by decision? And if you don't have the ability to just take him out in one punch, and a guy who knows how to jab, he throws enough, every time that this guy tries to close a distance, he's going to have to eat 4 or 5 punches, and it's going to back him up. You cannot take those many, because he doesn't just give you, he follows up. He'll give, if you don't back up after a couple of punches, he'll come with this power punch. Then you're in trouble. You can't take those hits for so long. So he does it perfectly. He keeps them at the end of their punches because he'll give you a punch that'll hurt, but he'll let you know that, look, if I can land this, he reminds you that if I can land this on you, I'm gonna keep only landing. He gives you like 2 choices. If you stay right here, I'm only gonna keep landing this. As soon as you try to close in the distance, if you're willing to take this and you still want more, the next punch is going to be the worst one. So now it messes with them. Like, okay, fine, let me just keep staying back here. But a guy with that length of a reach advantage, doing that type of a game plan, I just don't see the path to victory here. This is a guy who's been wrestling with this. They know each other's ins and outs. They've known everything. I just don't see it. And so I actually think he could be a bigger favorite because this guy's on a 12-13 fight win streak, or even more, but he's undefeated in the UFC. The longest active win streak in the welterweight or the UFC period right now. Active and champion. So just there's This guy's going to be going down as one of the greatest of all time. I'm telling you, he's just so dominant. He's a new breed. I don't expect anybody to be able to take it's just going to take somebody on the level of a Khabib or somebody with just a very strong skill set that separates him, that he can use. A guy who we see time after time do the same thing 13 times in a row and always work against, that thing that, because everybody knows what Khabib is going to do. The problem is stopping him from doing it. That's the type of opponent that's going to be able to put away Usman. Not a guy who's just going to have to wing it and find an opening, because you're not going to find it. There is not going to be this guy fights perfect. He doesn't make mistakes. All right, guys. So you got 5 picks now. I'll give you one more. Miranda Maverick versus Gillian Robertson. The same way Gillian Robertson is a her training, the stuff that she does to try to improve her game has worked against her. Sometimes, like when you got a guy who's coming out of the kickboxing organizations, or a guy who's coming off of every types of style kind of has their own disadvantages. Like a kickboxer is bad at fighting in an MMA octagon ring, because in kickboxing organizations they have ropes behind them instead of a steel cage that doesn't have any springs. So sometimes they get the false sense of comfort knowing that when they get backed up they can just do that ropey dope stuff and just move out the way, where they end up finding out the hard way after it's a repetition. When you're in a fight, you're relying on natural reflexes. You're not always using, there's a different part of your brain that you're using. It's not the one that calculates long term. It's the one that thinks about right now, about this minute and the next minute, not this minute and 10 minutes later. It's hard to explain it, but it's a different sense of your brain portion that you're using, and that brain is reflex mostly, because you have to think quick. You have to rely on your natural reflexes, so that part of your brain is active. And being in 100 fights where you're used to using the ropes, and now all of a sudden your body doesn't realize it's in a different type of environment, so it works against you sometimes. And like Israel Adesanya is a perfect example of that. Dustin Jacoby was there's a lot of fighters that are like that. So Julian is the same sense. She does so many grappling tournaments. She works on her grappling so hard that she finds herself working out of the guard and in the bottom position way too much, way too long, way too often, and doesn't realize that she's losing control time. She's losing aggression, control time, domination, and damage, and points, and she starts losing fights that she should have and could have probably won. But here's the thing that she's had the most trouble with, because she doesn't have the best technique at takedowns. So she's good on the ground, but she's not good at getting the fights to the ground. So what people have to do when they're not technically good at takedowns, they got to rely on power. They got to pick their opponents up, like the Kamzats, or like there's a lot of fighters that just rely on, or even Clay Guida is a good example. He picks people, he surprises them and picks them up and exerts a lot of energy and power to get the takedown. Instead of technique and make it simple and easy, he doesn't have like judo throws or some trips. He does it with his back and his muscles. He has to pick them up. And she doesn't possess that power, and she lacks the technique. So when she gets into those clinches where she's going to try to make an attempt at taking her opponent down, a girl like Maverick is a girl who grew up on the farm, doing rigorous, hard, strenuous work on a daily basis, picking up heavy stuff, doing chores around the farm. Her family owned the farm, and it's in her DNA just to have that type of hard work ethic. So a girl's going to be outpowering her is a girl who's going to be winning the exchanges and landing on. Look at the Santos fight. Santos doesn't have as much of the accolades or the credentials as Gillian Robertson, but she was winning the exchanges every single time because she was outpowering her. So the power is going to play a big factor, and unless she can fight against a girl who she can outmuscle, a scrawny, petite, very weak type of a fighter, she's not going to be successful because she's still not comfortable in her stand-up. Her stand-up striking is very, very low level. very, very uncomfortable on the feet still. She doesn't have confidence. But a girl who, as you saw, what the Georgian Lillian Jojo what happened to Lillian Jojo. She had they had to stop the fight. She had a broken nose, and the shot selection, the ferocity, the power that Maverick possesses, with the desire to want to win along with it. We did an interview with her, if you look back, just to get some insight, if you want to get an idea, to get some good prop bets, and just an idea of how she's going to win. There's a lot of invaluable information on that interview, and you can look at it on my channel. She was nice enough to accompany me on a segment where we talked about her career, her training, her childhood, how she grew up fighting and wanting to fight, or she was even on the... This is a girl who used to fight on the men's varsity wrestling team. So before Robertson was in tournaments and fighting, she was not only fighting, but fighting with guys. She's got power, the strength of... She's won matches against guys. The only girl on the men's varsity wrestling team. So she's got wrestling and grappling experience since high school days. That's a naturally good wrestler. She beat girls like Pearl Gonzalez, the girl who just beat Chelsea Hackett. I forgot her name, Victoria Leonardo. She beat her twice. She's a very, very good fighter. She's getting better and better. Her debut fight, she looked amazing. She started off a little bit just like the jitters of anybody who's in their debut fight on the big stage. That's common, but after she got past those little butterflies and the jitters, she got comfortable. It was a scary version of her, man. And that's why I get her nickname. She was the Fear the Maverick. You really should fear that girl. When she's in a fight, she's something to be feared. So I can see her hurting Robertson really bad. She did say she wanted to... Well, I don't want to give a spoiler alert. You guys, if you want to see what her plans are and how she's going to win, you got to look into the interview. It's on my channel, so you'll find it in the most recent videos. But yeah, you guys got a lot of picks. Anything else you guys need? I got a lot of prop bets, underdogs, parlays are going to be cashing in left and right. This is a card perfect for parlays. I got some fights on here that are going to be, there's no chance that they're not going to win. It's just so guaranteed that I'm going to make some such great paying parlays. But my system is designed so that in case even one or two of our big important picks, our parlay pieces, lose, we still make profit. And I guarantee that it happens. Like even with 2 wrong, you'll still make double your money, if not more. So but imagine those days when like the Hermanson cards or the Chiesa card or the Khabib card, when I don't get more than 1 wrong, where I get a perfect night. My system makes you like 40 times your money, guys. You'd have to lose 40 weeks in a row just to break even after winning with 1 week on my Patreon, guys. So I hope you see the value. This is the best time to sign up. It's only the beginning of the month. You get a full month ahead of you. I got some specials going on if you want to ask about it in the comment section. All right, so just to do a recap, Miranda Maverick, we have beating Julian Robertson. Kamaru Usman beating Gilbert Burns. Gabe Green beating Phil Rowe, Maki Pitolo by decision, or Marquez inside the distance. And I think that's it for now. And I may come back with one more segment, and I'll also do. I noticed if I was tied up with doing custom bet slips. It was a new feature. I didn't make time for the post weigh-in segment, although I did make posts. I noticed at the scales, I made a post on my, before the fight started, after the weigh-ins, I made a post saying that there's 3 guys that have already submit to their opponents. At the scales and the weigh-ins, the face-offs, I made a post that there's 3 guys. I'm so experienced at picking up on body language, eye contact, and just everything, that I saw Volkov already won the fight. I let them know that Alistair Overeem already submitted and acknowledged at the face-offs that he was going to lose. There was no chance that he was going to win, and that's why as soon as the fight started, he already covered up. He gave up before the fight started. I told you, I saw it at the scales. That's my specialty. That's why I saw Phil Hawes. I told everybody hedge off. he's going to lose, he doesn't look good. They pulled him off the card. I pick up the second guy. I picked up on 3 guys that I already knew were going to lose because of the scales. The second guy, Martin Day. Martin Day, it was so apparent, even more than Overeem. Martin Day was the worst one. The first worst guy on the scales and the face-offs, most people probably would have never even noticed. Martin Day. Martin Day, he was so sure that he was going to lose that fight. He probably bet money against himself. That's how sure I am that he knew he was going to lose. There was no denying his body language. Everything said it. Then the second most apparent was Alistair Overeem. And he was also very apparent. So I made those observations. I gave them all that stuff in the Patreon. I usually do a segment, but I don't have time because I'm one guy. And I got 100 people inside the Patreon that are asking for custom bet slips. I got to do their bet slips for them before the fight starts. So it's a lot of work. And that's why they pay me money for it. So it's not like I'm not doing it for free. So unfortunately, because YouTube doesn't pay me. So if you guys, that's why I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. If you could please leave a comment, I can keep doing these segments. The comments and the likes are what keep me coming. So if you see this, if it's benefiting you in any way, or if you just like it, if you can hit the like, the subscribe, and leave a comment, I would really appreciate it. And I'll come back with some segments, including the post-weigh-in observations, which is very essential for being comfortable on where you're going to put your money and who you're going to put it on. If you go like all in, like when I tell you to go all in, 5 times I told you to go all in, they all cashed in. My fades of the week, my underdogs, at a very good percentage as well. And Patreon also gives you outside MMA picks. I've had days like recently I went 7 out of 7 correct. 100% on my NBA picks. Out of all 7, and 2 of them were underdogs. So you get a lot of benefits, guys. Midweek opportunities, it pays itself off in one day. Thank you for your time. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, make a comment, and the Fighting Guru is going. We also are going to be giving merchandise, free merchandise. Check out this Fighting Guru cup, and we've got a Fighting Guru MMA Parlay King Fighting Guru t-shirt. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate your contribution on the show and in the Patreon, and I will be seeing you guys in the post. And there's another private segment I'm doing. If you're in the Patreon, in about an hour, you're going to see me load a private segment that's going to give you the full card breakdown. Every single fight, from the early prelims to the main event, all of the picks, how they're going to win, who's going to win, and how they're going to win, and how we're going to bet it. That's going to be a private segment I'm loading onto the Patreon today. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll see you soon.